Right, this is a final summary vid of the whole of the year's ayahuasca and plant medicine journey that I did in South America. Basically, to summarize what worked and what didn't for me. I've got a list here that I wrote in my Spanish dictionary ages ago, which is to highlight the treatments that I had in sort of pretty much order of preference, which is sort of the Aya damage list. Obviously, the complex post-traumatic stress disorder was the top of the list, which is, suffering from sort of the permanent anxiety, stomach churning, scenario with that. Um, that was dealt with actually very well by Aya almost immediately. Um, and ayahuasca has a very good track record of dealing with uh, depression, anxiety, addiction, um, and other sort of dark energy, basically, related situations. Very effective. Obviously, in my case, I did a lot of plant medicines, but ayahuasca up to pretty much till about April or so, until I went to Casa del Sol, and although a little bit in February with Flower of Life, doing some San Pedro, but it wasn't really a proper ceremony. I only knew what a proper ceremony was when I went to Ecuador with Jimena and Santiago, and basically had a final, what I call an exorcism, although it wasn't demonic level. Um, it was the last piece of what I felt I'd been carrying that basically seemed to be draining my life energy. That's the only way I can describe it for the previous couple of years. And that was put as at the bottom of my list, which was a low enthusiasm and very, very low energy, just couldn't do anything. Which you could say, well, that's part of the anxiety and being on antidepressants for 2 years and stuff. But anyway, that kind of really got finished off after San Pedro, after 10 months, basically, of me being in South America and four different um, retreats. And I did, obviously, after the first two, I'd done 2 dietas as well. So basically, I exceptionally effective for the depression, anxiety side of your brain chemistry. The second on the list was the lower back pain and the scoliosis, which obviously is without having an MRI scan, I don't know the state of scoliosis, but yes, it definitely removed my back pain. Although I did have further treatment in many other ways, particularly the neuro-emotional technique by Dr. Teschner, um, down in Ecuador as well, in Loja. Although very expensive, $100 an hour, a very Western psychological technique, which basically your body gives away by just lack of functioning of the brain being able to talk to certain muscles, with like the tests of like being able to break your fingers open, by asking emotionally loaded questions, and you can't resist someone trying to push your fingers apart when you're asked to. It's an incredible technique, and being back in the UK now for a month, I've finally found digs, so I can settle again. It's been hell, but that's another story. But I've been seeing a lot of Mike since I've been back. We haven't gone out and done any dowsing, but he actually found. He was given the name of a woman who's really local to where I am now, near Campbell. She's actually in Praise and Beeble in Cornwall, called Claire, and she does know the NET, but she doesn't call it that. She's a bit more along the dowsing sort of psychic aspect of it. And he had a 2-hour session with her for £25 and was really pleased with it. But he wanted a general energy kind of balancing and clearance and some emotional stuff from a previous relationship. Very happy with the way that turned out. Didn't have time to talk to her much, but I said about this technique. I said, is it the same one as the neuro-emotional stuff? She said, yeah, we use that. So there were a lot of techniques in common, although she used files of food, like to and rest. She said she rested them on his chest plate while he was lying down on at the bed. She checked chakras, energy imbalance. His heart was not quite balanced because some of his problems and anxiety came from distrust from a broken relationship, this sort of thing. So a bit more esoteric, a bit more sort of what people would call, your hippie dippy shit. That's what they'd call it, but of course I know it's not. And as does Mike, obviously being a dowser. So after my first few treatments of ayahuasca, I stopped having permanent back pain. And obviously, being in the heat of Peru, this really helped all the muscles. But basically, I had to do the dietas to lose weight. Not that I was particularly heavy, but I was probably knocking 90 kilos, and I went down, I think, as low as 82 maybe at one point. And what that does, seemingly, even if you have back problem issues, like your spine is in the wrong place and stuff, it allows muscles to sort of, in my case, with 3 major compression injuries over 20 years, at least it allows the muscles and the nerves to stop being impinged upon and causing pain, it seems. And that worked really well as well for me, but it wasn't really sort of ironed out until the neuroemotional technique with Dr. Teshner, because she had that thing. It's in previous videos, I've mentioned it, that little kind of stapler kind of thing that goes up the back of your spine and basically reconnects nerves that aren't getting the signals through to muscles. But obviously there's a major emotional aspect to that as well, where you can ask emotionally loaded questions. So people are interested in that. You can look up neuroemotional technique, because it came out of the chiropractic business, and people sort of reliving trauma while they're having treatment. And interestingly enough, ayahuasca works in a similar way by bringing subconscious trauma imagery, even though it may not be real, because obviously it can be, as I've said before, it can be really bizarre and just beyond imagination what you can see, but it seems to be a way of bringing aspects of trauma, for instance, into the conscious brain to allow resolution in the subconscious brain and overwrite memory circuits and stuff and stop them being triggered. So these techniques, both formal Western psychological techniques and the plant medicine techniques, seem to work in the same way. Obviously, with the plant medicine, one of the reasons they can be so unpleasant and such hard work for people is because you're in a really uncomfortable place, both mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, as I've said many times before, because you have to relive that emotion or trauma or whatever it might be, so that you're consciously aware but under the influence of the plant medicines and the shamans, etc., for it to be dealt with. Like, a few Western psychological techniques, be it neuroemotional technique or hypnosis. So Mike was blown away because he had the personal experience then. I described it to him of having these like little push against somebody. She'll be the practitioner will be say, right, push against my arm, and yep, you can do it. And then she'll ask an emotionally loaded question, and you can't. It's just bizarre. So your own body gives away aspects of psychological or emotional problems that everyone's carrying, no matter to what small degree, whether it's previous relationships, parental issues, whatever it is. And your body will give it away because your muscles won't work. The signals won't go from the brain to activate those muscles, and you have to experience it to appreciate it, because it is bizarre. And of course it's instantaneous, and then of course they'll fix that with holding acupuncture points and things like that. Maybe bit of thought process, just say, right, think about an issue that was bothering you, like whether you were put down by your father or mother or whatever it was, or whatever it is, and until you feel a change or feel some kind of resolution or have a memory while you're holding that pressure point, and then they'll redo the test and see what the improvement is, and clear things up that way. So I can highly recommend that as well. So going back to the lower back pain, pretty early on in Peru, I didn't suffer back pain every day just by virtue of getting out of the bed. So again, that's a massive removal of stress, because you're no longer in permanent pain anymore. I still have a back issue because it was bad injuries. Compression injuries are bad. So I still have to do my stretch exercises every day, which of course in Britain at the moment, this mini heat wave we've got, it's really easy to do. Not so easy in the cold days, but you just have to force yourself to do it. So I also put neck discs on because I popped 2 discs in my neck nearly 3 years ago now. 3 years ago, Christmas in Australia when I went swimming. But that was combined. I had a neck compression injury anyway, so that was kind of solved along with the pain. But they've gone back in place anyway. But obviously, I still do exercises where I have to sort of click my neck every day, and it just puts them in the right place so the muscles aren't tense, because that is a major cause, neck tension in many people, eye strain, especially with computers and stuff, for triggering migraines, which also have diminished massively. Actually, they're not on the list. The main thing, one of the main things for me was eczema, and the plant medicines didn't resolve that. Now, after Mike having his test yesterday, we asked if the rods, a few questions with dowsing, and we went through, because he just had some dietary stuff done, and then he checked again with the rods, and we just things off the top of our head, and things that we used to think were sort of beneficial, especially for keeping colds, like onions, garlic, chili for a stir fry. No, the rod said no, and that's what also his practitioner said yesterday. Certain diets, even peanuts for me, and I was eating a lot of peanuts towards the end. So it seems to be, we asked the rods if there was still a remaining spiritual or emotional aspect to my eczema, and they said no, it's dietary. So got to really iron out, and I've been started drinking soy milk here. That was off. That was a no, but according to the rods, shouldn't be drinking that. Almond milk, no. Only coconut water and coconut milk, really good. Dairy, obviously shouldn't have been drinking milk. Tea, normal tea, off the list, no good. Green tea, okay, but not with milk, standard supermarket dairy. So we're going to have to try and come up with a list of things, and Mike, is going to look into this, because he can look into being a practitioner with some of this stuff as well now. He's finally clicked that this is an option for him, because he did have sort of chakras. Because obviously anybody who can dowse can check the health levels of chakras, general energy states, and ask these dietary and other medical questions. If they are fortunate enough to have the ability to dowse, which he does, and unfortunately I don't still. Often thought that the eczema was part of a blood problem, maybe an immune system issue where your immune system's hypersensitive, which is why I can touch paper, rip cardboard, and get an instant flare up. Things like oil and petrol, some soaps can just flare me up. But the biggest thing as a trigger, which most people probably haven't realized, if you live in a damp house, especially in the UK and in Cornwall, where it's a perennial problem in Cornwall, because Cornwall's a very damp place. People don't think about it when they come on holiday, but many of the houses get really damp. It's a very damp, wet climate most of the year, 9 months of the year. Rains a lot, windy, drizzle, grey, overcast, and a lot of houses get the black mold, and that was absolutely confirmed. I knew that was a problem for me a couple of years before I even left, because I had really bad damp in my bedroom, and the eczema that's comes off the back of the black damp mold is horrendous. It affects your face. And then just a week before coming back, I texted my niece, who doesn't normally suffer from eczema. One does and one doesn't. One niece does quite bad, similar to us, like behind the knees, and gets the flare-ups like me, the dry skin, etc. Gets a big red flush. But the other one doesn't, except she was doing something on her van, and there was mold between the liners. She was doing insulation, and so she was exposed to it, and she broke out like I did in Colombia just before I came back, because I had some spots in that final room, and I was there for a month when I was doing the mushroom microdosing, and it was horrendous, because I'd been exposed for 3 weeks, as it was generally sort of getting into my system, I think. And of course at the time, because I was doing the mushrooms, I was a bit pissed off, because I thought, shit, maybe the mushrooms are great for the serotonin replacement and helping anxiety and stuff, as you can see on the videos I've done. They're absolutely wonderful. So can't wait to restart those at some point and do another microdosing session, which I will video and comment on, but obviously it's not the time of the year here yet. But black mold, absolute nasty shit. If your kids are in a bedroom, or you've got a bedroom, especially if you're sleeping in it, and once those spores released, you seem to be breathing them in, it has a really nasty effect. I had the flare-ups on my arms, and I'm still suffering in a way, an aftermath of all the changes of coming back to the UK, whether it's dry air starting the aircraft, because I had bad eczema before I left, so I've still got the dry skin. that hasn't cleared up. Still sort of getting over, but the flash is gone. The red flash is gone. So I'm slowly getting there, but absolutely horrendous because it tends to affect people's faces. It gives the cracks over the eyes, gives patches of eczema, and then your skin just dries out and falls off. And that's what happened to my niece. And that was verified with her because she didn't click at the time, and then she went back to do some work on the van a couple of weeks later, had it happen again, and then I texted her and said, I know for sure. I've got black mold in my bedroom. I've got a terrible eczema. And she replied and she said, that's funny you should mention that. She said, I've never suffered like that. She said, but I found black mold in the linings of her van that she lives in, trying to do insulation work. And she had a massive outbreak and had to take, go to the chemist and get Caniston and this sort of thing. And generally had a concoction, but it took a good week to clear up for her. So black mold's a nasty shit. But the root cause seems to be diet for general eczema, not specifically the black mold stuff. So I suggest maybe finding an alternative medicine practitioner and have a dietary response, because people who douse with pendulums or rods, who are along that kind of alternative spiritual path, they can find what you're allergic to or what you should and shouldn't be eating. So that might help to clear up. So I'm going to book a session with the lady that Mike had yesterday, Claire, but she hasn't got back to me yet. And we'll go from there. But I'm pretty much convinced now I've got to radically change my diet. Just from the list that me and Mike ran through quickly for both of us, and he found with him again nuts and almonds, various things. But what was really interesting, onions and garlic, no good. And it's funny because they were off the ayahuasca diet as well. They weren't regarded as beneficial, so that was interesting because we always thought that they would be. So that's pretty much covered the immune system cuts and stuff. And then one of the remaining things that I still suffer with a little bit is the arthritis in the knee and my left thumb joint, not my right so much, and also tinnitus in my ear. That didn't get touched at all. And at various points I did, use some ayahuasca ceremonies where you make an intention before, as to what you'd like resolved. And of course I did eczema a lot because I had it around my crutch and it drove me nuts at night with the sweat trying to drop off to sleep, and you start itching, and the cuts can be really painful, and it just drives you nuts. I had to pour agua florida, which is alcohol based, just to make it sting like fuck, to replace the itchiness with pure pain, to try and kick your body into a different state and then sort of fade out of that, just to be able to get to sleep at night. So that was a nightmare, although that's really reduced since I've been back. Even tap water, depending what country, down here in Cornwall, change of water always used to happen decades ago. Change of water between soft water and hard water areas used to have eczema attack, dry skin, again, up to a week before you'd balance back out. So, that's another thing to be aware of. And then the last on the list was the low enthusiasm and energy, but I know now that was tied in with basically the bad spiritual energy of after 45 years of trauma and stress, of being effectively infected. And with all of the ayahuasca treatments, the thing that comes out of that is mindfulness, especially being around people who are still in that kind of negative state, people who just moan on a day-to-day basis or get irate or stressed about things like driving. Oh, nobody can fucking drive now anymore, and why did that person do that? And you can get sucked back into these negative trains of just mental thought that become like these little wormy viruses that keep you in a negative state. So it's being mindful of those and just go, I'm not getting sucked into that again, because I used to be really bad for it too. And it becomes a habit, like a lot of these things, and then that habit becomes a thought pathway trigger, and you find yourself just dragged into it. So it's being around the same people after a year in South America, coming back, finding people who are still in that state, members of family who still suffer from that kind of mentality because it's become a habit. And of course they get stressed about it, and it's just like, why give a fuck? There's nothing you can do about it anyway. Whether it's immigrants or what the government's doing or all the fucking media shit that people get pumped with, just ignore it. It's, it's designed. That's what it's there for. It's designed. The whole of the media structure is designed to keep people in the state of fear and a state of negativity, it makes people, it makes you ill. So the plant medicines have really teach you that, because you have so much time to go through all of your personal issues, your life memory, especially if you do dietas for a couple of weeks and you've got nothing else to do than lie in a hammock in the heat like this, which it is today in Cornwall, sort of 30 degrees every day, and under the influence of the plant spirits, you can feel lethargic anyway. And that's the whole point. It's to reevaluate your existence in terms of time and space, not being tied to clocks, not being tied to diaries, not having to think about the future. Realize that the future and the past don't exist. Only the now exists. The past only exists as memories. So it's not real. The future is completely unwritten. There's no point worrying about it. Yes, you have to plan for the future to a degree, but you can't set it in stone, because as we've had this week, we've got a member of the family who's now in hospital. 2 days ago, out of the blue, she's had a history of strokes before. She's an elderly lady, and now she's in Trellisk Hospital with a very poor diagnosis. She was given 48 hours on entry, but of course now she's effectively in a coma, really. And sort of the last thing she'd had, the time she went to the doctors was for the third vaccine with the flu jab at the same time. Had a horrendous arm swelling outbreak, a reaction to the vaccines, a lot of blood clotting around her shoulder, and went to the doctors afterwards, and the attitude was, oh, that's normal for someone of your age. I mean, she's in her 80s. But now, not long after, she's had her fourth stroke, which is a bleed in the brain. So this whole thing about, you never know you can get hit by a car tomorrow. You've got to change your mentality about death, stop fearing death. I know it's easy to say after, you've had the spiritual experiences that I've had. And the whole process of ayahuasca is about removal of basically fear and anxiety. But there are other methods for people who can't exactly jump on a plane and pay lots of money to go to South America and get that level of healing. I said, but the main point of this video was as a summary for that whole journey. It's a year ago this month, a couple of weeks ago, that I left and arrived in Peru. So basically a year of plant medicine for somebody who really needed it. I was a very, very sick person in retrospect, which I knew at the time, but not realizing when it's put in perspective, and then you get over certain things, which did take the bulk of the year. So in summary, there was not just ayahuasca, there was San Pedro, 3 major ceremonies. There was the Kambo, which the scars on my arm don't show because of the type of skin. Unfortunately, I really like to have kept the dots. I've got 24 dots there somewhere, which represents 5 Kambo ceremonies. Again, cleansing with Icaro, sung by that was Yana and Mira in Ecuador, in Loja. Wonderful, beautiful people. And Rape, which is again a tobacco-based snuff, really. Not overly healing in itself. You don't feel an effect maybe except after the first initial buzz, but I've explained all of this. So in summary, 4 major plant medicines: Kambo, which is the frog, the poison arrow frog poison with the burning on the arm. Ayahuasca obviously is the drink, but again, don't think of it as just the drink. It's the work of the shamans and the plant spirits, that multi-dimensional energy involved and things like that. Exceptional record for addiction, for depression, for anxiety, particularly works very, very well for that. Said even cancers, but it depends. It's a complicated topic which I've touched on before, so there's no point going through it all again. People who want to research or look past on my site for all of the videos I've done for all the ayahuasca retreats, it's all in there somewhere. So basically that's the summary of that. So now it's a question of moving on. I'm trying to get back into my electronics hobby, looking for part-time work. I've managed to find a flat with everything stacked against me, with the the whole price of everything in the UK, like most other places in the West, is insane. The cost of rentals, especially everyone coming down to Cornwall, but I've been lucky because I can stay at Mike's place. He's renting it out to me because he lives on the Isle of Scilly at the moment because his dad's ill there with Alzheimer's in a care home. So he's there with his sisters. So we're going to go out and do some dowsing tomorrow. So I'll do a video of that. We're going to a church in Lostwithiel, to see his old friend and neighbour. And the thing with Lostwithiel Church, it's in Hamish Miller's book, the first or the second one, I can't remember, on the dowsing, because it's got the old medieval font that's got the big spiral third eye coming out of a head that's on the edge of the basin. It's very old, so it'd be interesting to douse that and see what kind of energies are going on in that church. It's obviously a very old one, so that'd be interesting as part of that meet. So we're going up tomorrow, so I'll probably put that up. And then the next video will be a whinge and something to be aware of with both Amazon and Airbnb, which I fell foul of and now can't communicate with them because of the ridiculous verification loop that you get stuck in, where they verify you by a phone number that in my case is dead, but you can't get out of it. So it meant that I couldn't get reimbursement on one of the Airbnbs that I got cancelled on me, or just didn't exist, when I got to Wales after driving all the way up there to look for accommodation. So I'll do that next. But as far as all the plant medicines, I obviously didn't bring any rapé back with me, and then there's no point. The only thing I did come back with, which was unplanned, it was an accident, I thought I'd actually thrown it out, was some coca leaves, just a small bag that was like $2.50 worth, and I found them in my in my rucksack, which I thought I'd gone through and binned them because I didn't want any hassle with immigration. I mean, for all I know, I don't even know if they're illegal or not, because it's just pure coca. It's not cocaine, obviously, in that form. So that's the only thing I brought back, which is just a stimulant which you chew. But I do now wish I'd brought my big jar of rapé back with me, because it's only tobacco. I was a bit paranoid that there may be other chemicals in it that may have been flagged up as what immigration and would deem as drugs, but it wasn't worth hassle. But I mean, I wish I had, because that jar cost me $80, and I had a full jar of that still, and it would have been nice to sort of bring back. But anyway, so that's that video. So that's basically the end, almost to within to the month of 12 months of my journey around South America, doing all the plant medicines that I could, as and when I was able to find retreats at the appropriate times and travel to the appropriate country to do them. So that's a year gone, another end of an era, and now it's time to move on to the next, another chapter in life.